It should be time for another DraftScience video presentation. So there was a comment, hey Gary, could you explain antimatter? I remember a while back you explained why it doesn't work the way people think. It doesn't exist as a fact. Okay, there's no such thing as antimatter. Um, and so then another guy responds, Ken is holding sermon about antimatter and now scalar waves. Uh, Ken Wheeler's an idiot. So what? I don't even know why. I shouldn't even have to have the conversation, right? This should be like dark matter. Everybody should be able to figure out. This is just a bunch of bullshit. I mean, silly. There's no place for the dark matter to live. There's no sign of it existing. It's like saying there's anti-humans, and that they're doing something, and blah blah blah. And there's just no evidence. They don't even leave footprints in the sand. There's, where do they go to the bathroom? I mean, none of it makes any sense. So why even engage in conversations like this? I mean, physics just makes itself ridiculous, I think, to anybody reasonable. So, sort of related, Sabine Hoffelder, is, why is quantum mechanics weird, the bomb? So she says it's not weird because of entanglement and superposition and all these things, because she doesn't have the same interpretation as other physicists, so she doesn't have to worry about the wackiness of it. So we'll go into some of that, because everything's just a metaphor or analogy or a fable. A fable, that's the one. It's just bullshit. So she's conceding that she's apparently a right and left hand glove person. Okay, when it comes to entanglement, there's no entanglement. There's just the fact that you created two opposite things in the universe, and obviously if you know what this one is, then you know someplace out there there's another. If you find the left glove, you know somewhere there's a right glove. And if you can actually say you've trapped two moments of time that are so perfect that two photons left a perfectly placed object that you know exactly where it is, and they traveled exactly the same speed, exactly the same distance, and you actually looked at them, you'd say, oh, one of them's right, one of them's left. That kind of bullshit. It's just bullshit that we can do anything like that. It's the whole Allen aspect bullshit. Entanglement experiments. I mean, it's all so bad. Nobody could ever. I can't even sum it up because the fable has so many talking fish, and they can hold hammers, and there's so many things they've done that break reality, that there's almost no point. But you can get to a simple concept. Okay, so I can give you a simple concept. You can be heading towards something, you can be staying, okay, or you can be leaving. These are the things you can do in the universe. And when you head towards something, when you're going somewhere, you're leaving someplace else, right? So leaving someplace, okay, you could say is the antimatter to arriving somewhere else, okay, going towards anyway. And so all this antimatter stuff is just about the fact that there's stuff on the right of you and stuff on the left of you, and you have a balancing device, a wall. So you're moving your wall between two pressures, and you can't move it this way without causing the effect this way, and you can't move it that way without causing the effect this way. So no matter what you do, okay, you're affecting both worlds, the left world and the right world. And so you could argue that's the simple definition of antimatter. Antimatter just means if something's moving this way, I'm watching it going that way, I can be rest assured there's something else in the universe going that way. So for every yin, there's a yang. Every time I move forward, I move away from something else. So you move towards, you move away. You move away, you move towards. It is that simple. That's the only principle involved here. Dirac's math just has to do with summing the universe. and basically saying this exact kind of thing, is that you really can't affect something without affecting something else. You can't go without leaving, right? You really can't. You can't go to your neighbor's house without leaving your house. I mean, yeah. All right. And so they've turned that into this whole pile of crap. Just like they turned right and left hand gloves into a bunch of crap. Into a bunch of superstition that people believe. So what's what you can go on down the list. I mean, dark matter is a different kind of example, just because that's such an obvious, desperate effort. It's not a metaphor for anything. It's not an analogy. It's not a fable. It's not a story. About something real. It's just about, hey, this fixes everything because now we have wild cards in the deck. Now I have a joker in the deck, and so I can have a full house when I don't have a full house, and I can have anything I want. If I put enough jokers in the deck, I can have royal flushes every frickin' time. So so that's a different kind of bullshit. So you almost don't want to get into it. All right, so in a sense, she's conceding. Okay, so she concedes she's a right and left-hand glover, even though she won't say that, I guess. She's not a believer that anything's truly uncertain in its condition, that it's, wobbling through space, not knowing whether it's a dead or a live cat. And so that's another example she brought up. And, this excuse, again, this whole idea that there's such a thing as a collapsed wave function, collapsing a wave function. It doesn't work. I mean, eventually they want to unify physics and include some sort of notion of gravity in their, wooey quantum standard model mechanics, because it's not in there now, and they want to put it in there. And if they do, then they have to start over, because it's going to break any notion that anything could be in any superimposed state and waiting for some collapse thing, because gravity, as we all kind of are aware, is constantly acting. So how could you ever escape it? How could I go somewhere without being collapsed, outed by gravity? So the idea, so this is another idea they just made a mess of, because they made this idea that somehow a photon is traveling and it's not doing anything until it gets somewhere. Nothing's happening to it. It's just all by itself, lonely streets, no headlights, nobody can see it. It hasn't been outed by the universe in some way. And that the only time it's important is when we show up with our camera to take a picture of it or something. And then all of a sudden it has to be whatever it's pretend, it can't pretend anymore, and it has to, dress regular. So this has gotten into this whole mush about people actually believing that our consciousness is affecting, the universe, somehow, that we're, what we have to look at something before it exists. Einstein's example of, does the moon disappear when I'm not looking at it? It got into a whole bunch of wacky conversation. It was totally unnecessary, because it's not really what they were saying, and it's not something they could say with any kind of legitimacy, because obviously these superimposed states, these wave functions, couldn't survive, because you don't need, theoretically, a camera we're looking through to collapse something. You just need any camera, any light, any part of the universe is touching something, then it's going to be measured. That's the word they use, measurement. It's going to be measured, and so nothing's going to go through an interferometer or any of this stuff. None of this can work. So they're claiming they take a photon and put it through a beam splitter and split it into two things. One photon turns into two things that are some sort of function. And when the function gets a picture taken of it, the other thing has to disappear, essentially. Only one of the things can be real. And but it doesn't work, because you can know, well, the whole time it's traveling through the interferometer, the universe is taking pictures of it. The gravity's affecting it. The rest of the universe is flying through. There's no way you can take it away from the fact that the rest of the universe exists and is going to be interacting with it constantly. So nothing could survive this intent or superimposed reality. It can't be in more than one place at once because it's constantly going to be asked, where are you? It's not going to be able to pretend it can do this, be in two places at once. So the whole thing doesn't make any sense. It's irrational nonsense. And again, it's just based on this idea that there's a equal or proportionally, just the idea that you can't push without affecting the other side. So when a photon is being created, I would argue, with an electron moving, when it moves this way to make the more compressed energy, that is, it's reflecting more light, the hand moves forward, reflecting more light to you. It's reflecting less light to me. Right? When my hand's going, oh shit, my hand could disappear theoretically. If I could move my hand really quick, it would disappear. I couldn't see it anymore. It wouldn't exist in my world. It would be reflecting so little energy. So I would be getting less energy while you're getting more energy. And it's that symmetry, as a practical fact, that you always have to account for the energy. So if I'm making more energy in your direction, I'm making less in some other direction. And obviously vice versa. So every time I'm making photons, so to speak, I'm making the positive part, the on part, the constructive, the part that has energy of the frequency. The frequency is just a dot, dot, dot. It's just frequency of wave. And you're making the high part of the wave, and then you're making the low part of the wave, and then you're making the high part of the wave, and then you're making the low part of a wave, and then the high part. If you have to use waves, if you really have to. So you can understand that I'm making a wave the other direction. The same wave I'm making to you, I'm making in the opposite direction, and they're just out of phase. They're completely opposite. When one is up, the other one is down. When the other one's up, this one's down. That's all. So that's all this crap, this antimatter crap. That's all. That's the foundation for it. Is just this argument of yin yang. It's not anti anything. It's just kind of obvious that if this is energy and you're pushing it, you're just, when you recombine the low with the high, you can understand if I combine the left with the right, I'll get nothing. So if I get hit by a piece of energy going this way, and I get hit with a piece of energy going this way, nothing's going to happen. Just like if I'm in a spaceship and I decide to, blow up a little explosion and have a dime go out this way at 1,000 miles an hour, and 2 kilograms go out that way at 1 mile an hour. The fact is, I've moved just as much matter in the universe, just as much push has been put into the universe, just as much capacity to move other atoms has been put into the universe. I've put an equal amount in, and therefore I'm going to keep going straight. I'm not going to change what I'm doing because it's equal. This conversation is almost so, it's so bad and so convoluted, and it's so wrapped up in just trust us. We have math. Nobody can explain. Frankly, I've never even seen anybody attempt a video to explain Dirac's mathematics. So, because it really is, it's what it is. This is what it is. It's just like all their experiments. Every single one of them. They take what a group is doing and they give the property of the group to the individual. And they say the individual objects have that property. when they don't. Individual water molecules are moving this way, or they move this way, or they move that way, or they move that way. They're not doing any kind of wave. They're doing one specific thing dependent on their circumstance. So their property and their behavior is not the behavior of the group. They don't have the wave function. They don't have a frequency. They don't have any of that stuff. And so all of this, you could say that's one of the key mistakes in the way they do physics, is not to recognize that you can't judge individuals based on a group. What the democracy says isn't what all the little particles inside of the democracy are saying. That kind of thing. The emergent function is not the elemental function. And so that's a key mistake here, is to say electrons are what a billion electrons do, or photons are what a billion photons do. That's not true. And it's just kind of a denial of the whole idea of recognizing that there are fundamental, elemental functions, and then there is emergent functions and properties. And so that's where all this comes from, is they're trying to force the fact that we can't put a magnifying glass on the individuals, and they're trying to force that perception, because it's easier, I guess, to give properties to individual things and not to have to explain that, it's just a byproduct of the fact that if one's going right, it looks like left from somebody else's perspective, right? You say this is right, I say that's left. That kind of argument. Might be the other way around. You say that's right, and I say that's left. And we should all be able to understand that's underlying all of this woo. So in the Sabine video, she's basically going down the list of all these silly things, superposition, entanglement, all these weirdnesses of quantum mechanics, and saying they're not weird. And then at the end, she gets to some, again, where this is another thing they do all the time. If they want to explain something, they don't explain it by showing you the actual experiment and telling you what the actual experiment's doing. They come up with some silly metaphor of, well, what if I have a box and I put a little teddy bear in it, and then I have another box and I put a frog in it, and then I turn the boxes upside down, and blah blah blah, and frogs only fall out. Frogs can stick to the wall, and so they don't fall out when the box is turned upside down. And they go through this whole storytelling, and she did this, and she did it again. So she took some 1995 experiment where the assumption is that polarization is 50-50, when they haven't proven that. They don't even think magnets are explicitly 50-50. I mean, this is sort of the joke, right? They think one side is a little tiny bit stronger than the other side. But anyway, so an unproven axiom or premise to start with, and then they say, well, because it doesn't come out 50-50 at the end of the experiment, the entanglement god must have done something. And then they cut, 50-50 into 25-25. When, again, why does it have to be 25-25? Like, why does a curve have to curve, on some circular arc? Well, what if it is an ellipse? What if it falls more in the first 3 seconds than it falls in the other 27 seconds? Because it's just a fact that that's the way it works. So there's so many things where they accept that as the rule, where they use some sort of Lorentzian transformation to recognize that there isn't a proportion, that it is an inverse square kind of law, something that's not, where double the distance isn't double the effect, it's 4 times the effect, those kind of rules. And they don't even assume that those rules could exist in something like polarization, where the higher the percentage you are, this little part here, this 10 degrees of difference will have more change in it, or more ability to change, than the rest of the distance. It's just like the two slit experiment. It's actually making uneven sized bars. Now, I had assumed they were all the same size, but I was wrong to assume that. And they're making the same mistake in assuming, without even testing, without even showing any test to see if there is, if the bars are the same size. And so they go into an experiment with an assumption, and if there's if that assumption isn't true, then the results are going to be that they think they found something they never even found, because it's just a byproduct of the fact that nature isn't what they said it was. The variables in the circumstance aren't the same. It's like changing the frequency of the light, going into the two slit experiment, and then saying, look, we proved a new phenomenon. That it isn't consistent. Sometimes the slit warps it this much, and how can, making up a whole story about, and all you did was you were changing the frequency of the light. There's no correlation to any new property. All right, so how much to go into this? I'm trying to emphasize that they can't explain a two-slit experiment to you honestly. They can't talk about an Eddington experiment, a simple lensing experiment. They can't do that honestly. They can't have an honest conversation about these really simple elemental experiments, ones that were done hundreds of years ago even, ones that you're capable of doing 100 years ago. And they can't honestly describe those experiments, and yet you trust them, for experiments that are infinitely more complicated. I mean, like LEGO. So many engineering manipulations, so many black boxes of we're going to change the frequency of the light. I mean, they actually do this in the experiment, right? They start off with a green laser and turn it into an infrared laser. You trust that they can do all of that and still keep track of these photons? That nothing's getting wooed in that process, and then they bounce it between mirrors 1,600 times. Really, very complex mirrors. Not just a mirror. Some sort of, mathematically engineered crazy mirror that, by being this big, somehow guarantees that the photon bounces off the surface. I mean, you have to believe that that's really possible, that I can make a mirror this thick and guarantee that the photon bounced off the surface. I mean, really, does that make any sense? I don't think that makes any sense. The thicker the mirror, the more likely it is you're bouncing off the surface? I don't think so. So, I mean, come on. This isn't even ripe for a conversation. You can't even have a conversation because there's so much bullshit in this. So anyway, so that's the again the Sabine Hassenfelder is such a hypocrite. She talks science with physics without the gobbledygook, So she won't even just say, okay, there is a question regarding entanglement. Does entanglement mean that this particle is unknown and this particle is unknown? Okay, and when you find out what this one is, you automatically find out what this one is. Or, the simpler answer, the Einstein argument that everybody thought was wrong, or the, I'm just saying, left, it was made that way, the hidden variable, right? So she doesn't, instead of using the key words to identify herself as somebody protesting against these more elaborate concepts of the ones that lead to multiverses and the ones that lead to some notion that something is always superimposed because there's so many layers of our magical splitting, the magical, I'm in 7 zillion, even my pieces are in 7 zillion different universes. And, and again, these are all intractable. And they're so, the fact that nobody's pointed out the catches, how it just doesn't work. So she uses a bomb experiment, like again another fake analogy where she's turned the objects into anthropomorphized mice and cheese, and then said, oh well, this is the experiment. The mouse chases the thing and goes through a wheel and da da da. I mean, the experiment is really a lens and polarizing film and some sort of detector, and the real experiment. There's no mice chasing cheese. There's no bomb. There's no experiment they did that has anything like what she's describing. And it's just that's without the gobbledygook. No, that's bullshit. Is what that's called. All right. So, I mean, the other thing I wanted to bring up, just I might as well throw it in there. I mean, there's simple arguments you could make that sort of defeat the storytelling. So, somebody could tell a story about time travel. But the catch is, right, is that, say if I went back in time to Benjamin Franklin, the fact is the atoms I'm going to be made out of are historical atoms. They've already existed, but they existed 200 years ago. I'm made of atoms that have been around a long, long time, and they've just moved through the environment. So I could actually be made out of atoms that Benjamin Franklin, if I went to go visit him, was made out of. I mean, how can the same atom be in two places at once? I mean, it is the same atom. So you can almost understand that, well, all of the atoms I was made out of couldn't go back in time because now they're in the same time as they were doing something else. They were doing this inside of Benjamin Franklin. They can't be doing this inside of me now at the same time. That wouldn't work. I put more mass in the universe. I've just poofed it in. So you can sort of understand that can't work. It just won't work. And this, you get the same thing going forward, except forward you can always pretend you just went to sleep. So the simple argument is I can just take my matter, make it go to sleep, and it never does anything in the rest of the universe because it went to sleep and it's just sleeping while the rest of the universe does its thing, and then it just wakes up in the future. That's one kind of notion of going forward. But you really can't go backward just because you have to really then force the same piece of matter to be in two places at once and kind of deny any continuity in the universe, where going to sleep is, that you can do. But any notion that you could jump to the future like warp speed, how are you going to do it? Because the future has your atoms should have done a whole bunch of life and death stuff. How can you go somewhere where you died in the past, your atoms were released, they went into the environment, they grew trees, they did different things. How can you go to that future with the same set of atoms? The same set of atoms that had to have a lineage in the time between your life and the future. The atoms were doing stuff and they were making that future. What if they're critical to the existence of the future, in some way? And then you show up and say, no, I want my atoms. My atoms are here. I kept my atoms. They didn't die. They didn't do this. They didn't do, they didn't do all of those things. So how can it work? So it can only work as an idea by just falling asleep. But you can't do it mechanically any other way. You just have to go to sleep, wait for the future to show up, and then wake up. That's the only way you're ever going to get there. So all of this is just, it's just, I mean, well, even what's on this, the subscriptions, I mean, there's all these people that are, got all kinds of cognitive, real, psychiatric issues. I mean, there's all kinds of, and everybody's just so full of shit. I mean, it's just, there's no grounding. There's nothing. There's no longer any obligation to take account for all of the facts and then, try to put the pieces together. Everybody's just saying, I'll just take this one piece and I'll make up the rest. And then I'll take these two pieces and I'll make up the rest. And Yeah, there's no obligation to stay grounded and say these are the pieces we have. This is the experimental evidence, and to do this simple thing of just saying, well, why, there's somebody says this is what I propose, superposition. Well, then the counter proposal should be, well, I propose that gravity is a real force, and just like a camera, it's outing the superimposed particles all the time. They can't really do anything without being exposed by the universe, gravity, cell phones, all the other manifestations, the cosmic background radiation. The cat can't be dead and alive because the events that are supposed to have been variable already took place. It was already, every single bit of the experiment has already been, pictures being taken of it all the time. There's no secret place inside the box, where things can be superimposed, at two places at once. Can't happen. Because they're, again, just constantly being collapsed into one reality. There's not even time to make these, these multiverses. There's not enough time between the collapses. Anyway, so yeah, I don't really want to talk about it. I'm just so tired of. I just didn't think people were this dumb, and unfortunately they are. That's all I can. I'm sorry you're all so fucking dumb, and that you think they have really done any work on this physics thing at all. I mean, I could just go back to the Feynman example. I mean, he spent a whole bunch of time creating a little presentation for the public, blah 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 blah, to do some physics, and it's just full of bullshit and storytelling and nonsense. Because you can't tell it honestly. Because they never even did the work. Their math never, the Young experiment, they all keep saying the Young double slit experiment. Young's math didn't work. And, you can point it out and they won't even admit it now. When you can find out it won't work, you can go try it. It doesn't work. The distance between the wave centers and the center of the opening, that distance will predict nothing. It won't get anything right. Won't get the little bars right, won't get the envelope right, won't get either one of them right. So why is this, how can you keep holding it up as an example of success when it's obviously failure? I just, but whatever. I endeavor to persevere, but some days it's rough. And, when you people start going on these tangents, could you explain antimatter? As soon as you heard the words, you should have said, what? What are people talking? What do you mean antimatter? What do you mean? Oh, there's just as much of the universe I can't see. In the sense of a bunch of opposite things. There's doppelgangers and all this. You can't believe that horse shit. So again, all they mean by annihilation, okay, is again that yes, eventually left, the thing going this way will eventually interact with the thing that went that way. That the absence of, when you go this way and you leave the empty spot here, and the empty spot's going to travel through space, okay, and your compressed spot is over here traveling through space. Eventually those two are going to bang into each other and go back to being, equally spaced. You're just going to change spatial relationships, and you have the compressed state here and the uncompressed state here, and the two will eventually equalize in the function of the whole universe. That's happening all the time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's all it is, and all of this mystique and all of this mumbo jumbo and all this wooey crap built on a concept that's simple. I mean, it's and you trust these people. I mean, they'll turn that into such an elaborate story. Antimatter, you know, when all they really mean is, okay, and then they'll say everything has a frequency, you know, everything has a wavelength. When no, everything stores energy that's big, you know. So as a storage device, it's going to, you know, it's absorbing all kinds of frequencies, and obviously it's going to give back what it absorbs. So yeah, you know, the bigger things are absorbing lots of little frequencies, and you could just add it all up and say, yes, they have a frequency. But they really don't. They don't have any of it. I mean, them moving, you know, little tiny jiggles, doesn't mean they have something. It just means that they're going to affect the universe by doing this, by yielding to it, by being affected by it, by reflecting it. So it's like nothing has a frequency. Everything just reacts to the world as it pokes it. And so if the universe has a frequency in it, things will reflect that. So it comes down to simple concepts like reflection. And again, just simple concepts like, well, what are the three states? Well, moving towards you, not moving, and moving away from you. There you go. The three states of matter. Anyway. So enough of this crap. And so hopefully to get to other things, you know, there's lots of things in the works, blah, 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 blah. We'll see what happens. And such. So, yeah, it just isn't any useful commentary. And certainly no useful counter arguments to anything. So, blah, 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 blah. And I just don't have the stomach to play another Ken Wheeler video. Scalar waves. He's already said that scalar waves, and I heard him in a video saying, oh, I disagree with whatever his face is, the nut with the scalar waves. You know, it's just low frequency radiation. I mean, you know, but they make it scalar waves, make it sound. Anyway, so let's just get the hell out of here. I changed my keyboard, so now I have to figure out what button to press. I think that's it. There it is. This has been a DraftScience video presentation. Till the next time and such.